calculated it took him, he did all the collections on one day at the end of the month, all on the south side, and it would have taken him 14 hours a day to drive around collecting the money, because he collected it from different places. Now it's very interesting, this is part of the network thing. They could only take in bookmakers they could trust as well. And that meant that bookmakers had to be able to vouch for each other. So all the bookmakers come from the south side or from the centre of the city, not from the north side. And there's a great quote in the tapes when he was on his corruption charge and the police were taking him when he tried to bribe the head of the licensing branch in the 70s. He said, what about the north side? No, we need the north side because they're the people we have to arrest. We have to be seen to be doing something, and if we have everybody pay, we're not arresting anybody, so we leave the north side alone. And it still stays the same, it's still pretty much the south side Gold Coast bookmakers. But a new arrangement starts, we just go back to that previous one. Somebody came to him and said, have you ever thought of taking a red penny, which is payments for prostitution? He said, well, why not? I'm doing everything else. And he then started collecting money through Dwyer. Dwyer was the person who first came to him. And I'm trying to read this myself. We get those famous people, Hector Hapido and Tilly, Victor Conti and Jerry Bellino started running prostitution. They also started running gambling houses as well. So both pairs were pretty much running most of the prostitution and gambling in Brisbane that we're aware of. It's highly unlikely they had it all, but that's the story, they had it all. There's rumours that especially Conti was running drugs as well, but in all the evidence that I've read from the inquiry so far, everyone says, Queensland at this time, no one really knew about drugs. They had a presentation on drugs in the early 70s, they all laughed. They said, what are you talking about? There's no drugs up here. Drugs was a Sydney thing, not a Brisbane thing. In order to keep this system going, Jack started bringing in more and more police. He had most of it, well not most of it, but certainly a large proportion of the licensing branch. And then he got a former person who'd left their bones and went to Bureau of Criminal Intelligence. He needed someone there who said, your sole job is to say, if they mention these people, let me know. Don't want you to bring documents or anything, just let me know if they're investigating these people. And the consorting squad as well. The consorting squad is a wonderful institution. It was the old intelligence branch. They had to look to see who was consorting with criminals and who criminals were consorting with. How did they do that? By consorting with criminals. It was a drinking squad, as described in New South Wales. So it's a great particular institution across Australia, I should say, that somebody should do a nice little thesis on. How did the consorting squad ever operate, and how the hell was anyone even justifying it? Now, one of the things started happening about reputation here. Jack Herbert's reputation was that he was Mr. Reliable. Jack Herbert's reputation also was that he was on the take. So people said, hey, you're on the take, I'm going to start cheating the other people in the network. And they knew that Jack was corruptible, so they started cheating with Jack against the other people. And one person in particular, down here, Ross and then Beljo, what they did is they were really the proteges of Jack Herbert. They could do the books, they could do the numbers, and they started working out the courier mail advertising for prostitution. And they could track the brothels as they moved and work out when the people who were paying were opening more brothels than they said. They were paying $1,000, $2,000 a month for each brothel. So New South Wales cops were getting 1/10 that amount. New South Wales cops got ripped off entirely. So the Queensland cops were charging very high rates that people were willing to pay. Jack was telling all the police they had, I think it was 5 brothels each. They were running many more than that. They were running outsourced escort operations as well. Ross worked out where they were, Burgess worked out where they were, they told Jack, so they were doing a separate collect. They collected twice from each person. Once for the official corruption, and a second time for the underhanded corruption. So they were still getting paid, so there was a sub-network within the corrupt network collecting more corruption, if you like. How easy was it to set up this operation? They started off running on the Gold Coast, and we'll just go back to that next one. Gold Coast CID. So there was prostitution on the Gold Coast and gaming on the Gold Coast as well. A guy came up to the Gold Coast and he wanted to set up a prostitution network. He wanted to pay the police, and he walked straight into Sergeant Jackson's office and he said, hi, I'm setting up brothels down the road and I want to start paying you. And Jackson said, well, okay, that sounds like a great idea, but can I ask you, why did you decide to just walk in and tell me? He said, well, everywhere I've gone, I've done exactly that and no one's ever said no. So, you know, inductive logic, if it works 10 times, it must keep working in Queensland too. So he just walked into the office and said, I want to start paying bribes for prostitution. And this guy was so audacious, he actually had big flashing signs above his brothels. And the police said, God, you've got to close it down and stop parking your Rolls Royce in front of the brothel. It's not helping. They said, Jack, go and talk to him. Jack was the broker. Jack had to talk to everyone. The cops couldn't be seen to talk to him. So Jack, being the honest man he was, said, they want you to stop doing it. He said, tell you what, I'll start paying you $200 a month extra, just to you, to leave the sign up. He said, oh, well, I'll have to pay one of the cops. So he started paying one of the other cops in there. You'll see that payment there, to keep it all quiet. So whenever anyone complains, say it's all under control. Okay, I'll do that. So they had another sub-operation. They were corrupting the corrupt police, if you like. This whole network continued on until the inquiry started. No official investigations closed it down. The ABC closed it down. The Phil Dickey reports didn't close it down. It annoyed people. It mostly annoyed Jerry Bellino. And Phil Dickey's papers are now over at the State Library. I saw them when they were at UQ, and I've got a few wonderful photos. There's this great photo of Phil Dickey's up in the ceiling over one of the casinos, and Jerry Bellino's downstairs waving his finger at him, telling him to get down. Because he just crawled around all the South Brisbane casinos, took photos of everyone that was there, did stories in the Courier Mail. That wasn't enough to scare them. For some reason, getting it on television scared the crap out of everybody. They panicked. Police started leaving, people were hiding. Another great thing for someone to study. What is it about this particular investigation that suddenly scared them? They weren't scared of any police investigations. And this is at a time where something could have happened, even though Terry Lewis was the commissioner. Anyhow, what was the power that Jack Herbert had over everybody? Yep. One, he had this reputation that was so strong, people needed him. People knew that if we're going to do something, we have to have Jack involved, or we're never going to get anything working. Two, he was the broker. Because he had that reputation, no one else had it. Everybody worked through Jack Herbert and through no one else. So he had the exclusive knowledge on everything that was operating and who was there. He also had a monopoly. His monopoly was contact with Terry Lewis. Terry Lewis actually had, according to Jack, very little knowledge of who was doing what. As long as he got paid, he didn't care. But Jack didn't tell anyone else that. Everyone thought that Terry Lewis knew exactly what was going on. And this is where we bring in the final bit. Jack used extortion against the police and the other people. Whenever anyone stepped out of line, he would go to them and say, I'll tell Terry. They go, oh, okay, I'll stop. Because they all believed that Terry Lewis was the mastermind, slowly ticking off everything everyone was doing. So his monopoly of knowledge was he could put forward this front that he had greater power than he actually had. But he actually had it in the sense of that front worked and people believed him, which was part of his reputation. So what was the strength and how did he succeed? He succeeded through these four things. And it's quite different to Sammy the Bull Gravano. There's no patronage network, but it is very similar to Howard Marks insofar as the brokerage and the reputation parts are there. But it is still quite unique. Now this study is going to be coming out in the next the next edition of the journal Global Crime. So we've got it through. It's an area that we can continue to do. One of the next studies we'd love to do is actually get all the information about the Sydney networks that were going on through the 60s, 70s and 80s and plot those out and see who was successful and do multiple life pathways. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?